Well, hello everybody. Thank you for staying behind. It's always a tough time following Vitalik, but I do have a couple of words for him in a second. I'm Brenda, I'm the CEO of Teller, and Teller is the only oracle that was designed to be decentralized from the beginning. We launched in 2019. We were a fair launch. From the beginning, reporters were required to stake. They could be disputed on-chain, and anybody could request any type of information as long as they tipped on-chain. So yes, on his last talk, if you guys didn't catch it, he said that one of the most important things that we could be doing in the space is actually improving oracles. I couldn't agree more, and I would love for you, Vitalik, if you ever see this talk, to actually come out and talk to me about it and actually call out why and what oracles have been doing wrong, or centralized oracles, make a distinction between centralized oracles, decentralized oracles, and help us grow. So with that, a very direct message, I'm going to move on to what I'm actually here to talk about. So before crypto, I was an economist with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out a lot of the major statistics for the US government. Today I'm going to talk about bridging macroeconomic data on-chain and why that has been so difficult. The oracle problem for market prices and macroeconomic statistics is very different. So market prices in general, you can observe the majority of the markets, you can observe them, right? In general, you can find where the majority of the volume is happening, and you can come up with some price discovery that is observable. When you're talking about macroeconomic statistics, it's a lot harder because you're talking about a lot of different aspects of the economy, and it's very, very hard to observe. It's very hard to observe for anybody. Also, they have two different manipulation surfaces. For market prices, you have the markets, so that is observable. For macroeconomic statistics, it's a lot more subtle, and it can be within their methodology, and it can also be just political capture or coercion, because politicians fund the very statistical agencies that produce them. And people don't always make the connection between the CPI or inflation and how it directly affects them. The CPI is used for so many things by the government, from adjusting pensions and payments that go to the public, like like different things, like in the U.S., like for safety networks, they'll be changed based on inflation, so that could mean that the government has to give out more money in assistance payments. Also, wage escalations, so most government employees will have their pay increase based on inflation at the end of each year. Also, they use it to inform their monetary policy, and the IMF actually uses inflation, or the inflation in any country, as part of their risk assessment. The higher risk you have, the more conditions the IMF might put in your country when they lend you money, or when they lend them money. So with that said, people don't always understand how politicized this number is. From the inception of the CPI in the US in the 1890s, it was commissioned because Republicans and Democrats were arguing about who was right about the McKinley tariffs. And then it took 90 years for them to actually create, or for them to actually include Blacks and Hispanic families into the survey, so they didn't have the entire population. And then in 1999, the Boston Commission report had all of these changes to the CPI methodology that was generally geared towards decreasing it. And once implemented, they actually saved the government over $1 trillion of money that would have otherwise gone out to the public. And Argentina is a very special case that we will talk a little bit more in the later slides, but they basically openly admitted to modifying, distorting the CPI for that period of time. And this is a period of time where inflation was so high that people clearly knew that the government was lying. Eventually, they stopped producing it in 2015. And out of that, though, some economists from MIT did a lot of research to recreate that period of time for them. And I'm getting a lot of the methodology that we would like to implement to create an independent CPI from the research that they did. And just to put it into perspective how politicized this is, Turkey in 2022, that's not very long ago, they actually filed criminal charges against an independent group that was trying to recreate an independent CPI number. I want to repeat that. Criminal charges, not civil, criminal. So this is how scared governments are of oversight. But before I can talk about the challenges that we run into on recreating an independent CPI, I need to talk to you a little bit more about how it's actually created and go a little bit deep in it, because that's where the challenges lie. So I hope you guys had coffee, because it's going to be deep. So first of all, the government gathers, oh no, this is the wrong presentation. Anyway, so these are the wrong slides, by the way. Anyway, so the government gathers information from administrative data and 2 surveys, household surveys and business surveys. And from that, they create a universe that represents the population of items that we all consume. Right? So this is a lot of information. And this universe don't only contain prices, they contain quantity, so that way they can figure out the market share of all the categories that are of things that you spend money on. And then once they have this universe that hopefully has everybody represented in it, they can get a random sample from it. And this universe is so important, because that's how you come out with weights, how you're gonna weight each category. So in general, people will spend about almost 45% of their money on housing, and then 15% on food and beverages. So how you spend your money matters a lot, but them knowing how you spend it allows them to get a proper weight, so that when they calculate the CPI, it actually represents how you spend your money and is representative of inflation. So after that, then they take this sample and then they start collecting some information, and they'll take into consideration, non-response, either because of no contact, or maybe some people just refuse to provide data. And then, eventually they also they have a privacy agreement with anybody that provides them data. So they'll suppress some cells if necessary, if for some reason people can reverse engineer pricing of, items within the cells. And then after they do that, they'll go back, reweight, and then they'll start collecting information. And then while they collect information, they'll be able to observe item non-response as well as attrition rate. And so item non-response is like people might stop reporting what they spend on something. And attrition rate is basically people just get tired of responding to the survey. And so over time, they just start providing information. All of these they take into consideration the next time they get a sample of goods, and they just oversample because they know that they're going to eventually have so much attrition that the sales will become impossible to publish. And then finally, once they're ready to aggregate this information, they collect it, they run it through outlier detection, they have analysts go through it just in case any stragglers were left in there. Then they do some imputation for things that are not reported. And then finally, they do the aggregation, which is the easiest part of it all. Also, all of this methodology is very, very transparent. What's not transparent, it's the administrative data and the universe that they use, and then the microdata that is used for creating the actual number. There are 3 different CPIs that are published every month. The main one is the CPI-U. And And even though it has had tweaks in methodology, it is very difficult to do tweaks in methodology on it because it's so politicized. Generally administrations don't want to change anything, so they just don't. And that's the reason the CPI, the change CPI-U exists, because they couldn't change that because politicians didn't allow it. So they just created a different measure that had improvements in methodology. But in general, everybody pays attention to the CPI-U. All of this data is actually collected for free. Nobody gets paid. It's all voluntary data, except for the administrative data that the government requires businesses to provide. And so that's how that works. And guys, I really hate that I don't have my slides. But so I talked about all the challenges within like the statistical challenges of getting a proper sample base and making sure that you have those weights properly allocated, because that is what drives whether or not the CPI is going to be correct. The big criticisms of the CPI, however, are generally substitution bias, lagged inclusion of items, poor quality adjustments. So basically, for substitution bias, it's basically the government assumes that you are just as well off if you're eating a steak or if you're eating McDonald's. If you get 20 grams of protein a day, they're like, well, you know, you're just as well off. They also, another criticism is that, and that's what they want. So they're always trying to make sure that that substitution bias that doesn't creep in, and it's generally an adjustment in methodology that leads the CPI to usually be lower. Rarely, actually, I've never seen any adjustments done for it to actually be higher. Lagged inclusion of items, if you choose a basket of goods at the beginning of the period, over time people change preferences or new items come into play. People, just preferences or new things. And so that becomes, because you start at a period of time, they don't continuously update that. So until the period ends and then they get another sample, then the old stuff is going to be there for a while. Poor quality adjustments is basically they're collecting data for an iPhone 12 and then next year is the 13. They have to account for the change in the technology, because otherwise it's not just an inflation change, but actually a technology change. The camera might be better. So those type of adjustments need to be done. Weights lag stem from the fact that there's a lack of inclusion of new items, and those preferences can change. And so the weights in the categories can change, but that's not really taken into consideration through the period of time because they're locked in. Now, all of these are not going to go away because we create an independent, all of these criticisms and things are not going to go away because we create an independent CPI. With an independent CPI, what we are trying to address is actually the conflict of interest, right? So if the government benefits from the CPI being suppressed, and they continue to make methodology changes to suppress it, because either they want an IMF loan or because it just saves them money, nobody really talks about the huge conflict of interest that exists right there. And everybody just trusts the numbers blindly. Not so much in Argentina anymore, but it does happen. So the conflict of interest, the censorship, suppression, and distortion is what we're trying to address. And what I'm proposing, and anyway, some of the challenges, so what I'm proposing is basically recreating this. Aside from the challenges that I already spoke about that every survey has, the biggest challenge to recreating a decentralized CPI is the fact that we don't have that universe data. And it is very difficult to reconstruct because we cannot compel people to give us their information, especially businesses, for free. Right? So there's a couple of things that we can do to address that. We can, for one, we can buy the data, but going back to the fact that this would be a decentralized CPI, we cannot really implement too many incentives because we want to avoid self-selection bias. So if I actually offer to pay people money for them to provide information, and this is one of the reasons the government does not pay individuals to provide information, it's voluntary and free. It's because you don't want just poor people or people that need the money to provide the information, because then you're not getting a full representative sample of the population. You can infer from that. So that's a difficulty that we would have to deal with, but that's a difficulty that everybody deals with, including the government. Then, if we do it independently and in decentralized ways, we would have the cost of decentralized storage, right? And then, if it's a public good, who pays for it? That's a huge question. And there are ways that you can incentivize the mechanism as a DAO or like as a community, especially if you don't trust your government. But it is a challenge. It is not something that's going to be easily attainable. And then getting an actual universe to have a proper sample, there's a couple of ways that you can do it if you actually have enough money and pay for it. There is Visa and MasterCard actually have a more robust universe of how we spend our money. But there are privacy laws, so they can't just go about telling people what you spend your money on, but they do sell aggregated reports on it. And those aggregated reports are probably much, much better than what the government has, but they also guard them very closely because that gives them, it's a source of income for them. So it's expensive. The other source that we could use is, there's these two other companies that collect scanner data directly from reporters, and they have agreements, exclusive agreements, by the way. So neither of them have everybody. So if you're providing the data to one of them, you're not going to be with the other. So and the value that these businesses get from them is that they get analytics back. And so, but their data is also very expensive. Now, another thing that it's for future research, and I think it's becoming more and more feasible, is actually allowing people to voluntarily provide their data with privacy-preserving mechanisms like secret proof, that you could potentially be willing to provide your information if it was protected, right? And we could just use your numbers to actually do either weights or reproduce the CPI. And then the last thing, I really wish, and the last thing, because I think I'm getting kicked out of the stage, that I want to talk about is what we can do currently. So currently, there is no fix to the weights problem, and we've seen that even with the recreation of the Argentina. So from the research that was done through Argentina, Price Stats came about, and it's a product that provides different CPI numbers for different countries, and they still apply weights from the government. So the weights problem is a very difficult problem to solve unless you have enough money to get all of this data from private companies or create a shadow survey from people and just ask anybody that that is being surveyed by the government to provide the data also on chain, and then now you have the macro data to actually validate it. But then again, that comes with like a lot more research on how CK proofs can be used for that. I want to close with a sentence that was probably earlier. Sorry. Why this matters is because Benjamin Franklin once said, "But in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." I went ahead and corrected that because in the US, if you have enough money, you can probably avoid taxes. But no matter who you are, you will experience inflation. No matter who you are, how poor you are, it doesn't. Unlike governments, it does not discriminate. And with that, thank you so much for your time and for staying behind. Sorry.